Okay, good day. This is the Elder Millennial podcast, Rants from a Microplastic Mind. I'm Microplastic Messiah. You might be wondering why I called it this, but whenever I'm doing rants about people from, like, say, the boomer era, I tend to always reference the fact that they seem to be suffering from, like, lead poisoning. I think that's a meme that's been kind of going around in millennial circles. And they kind of have, like, a face. Like, no offense to any boomers or anything, but people who know what I'm talking about know what I mean. Is like, you can be talking to someone who's seems like pretty chill and relaxed, but then every once in a while they just kind of like flip. And you can see their eyes like glaze over and they get really mad for no reason. So again, no offense, because like the whole reason I'm using microplastics to reference my podcast is because like each generation seems to have its own kind of thing. Like, before the boomers was probably, the greatest generation, and they were probably full of asbestos, and the boomers are probably full of lead, and we're all full of plastic. Like they say, you have something like a credit card's worth of plastic in your brain or body. I have to look it up, but it's something like that. So anyway, since I was born in around 85, so I definitely have at least a credit card's worth. So I've been told by two people the other day that I might be decent at doing this kind of thing because I have many rants about many things. So I figured I'd give it a go. So we came up with a concept. I've beta tested, but yeah. So there's a lot going on in the world, and there's one thing I don't want to be in my first episode. So I'm not going to address that. But I am Canadian, so I'm going to maybe try and focus more on like Canadian topics. So right now, what's going on in the world, like Mark Carney just came back from the States from talking to Trump. And I found in a lot of the other conversations he's had with Trump, there was a lead up to it. It was in the news, say, oh, Carney's going to go down to the States and talk to him. But this time it didn't feel like there was a ton of lead up to it. And then when he came back, he stopped all the retaliatory tariffs from Trump in the States, and he's the thing I didn't want to talk about, but I mean, come on. How can you not these days? So part of me is like, why did that happen? And there's a bunch of stuff going on with Venezuela right now, too, because I've been seeing in the news that Trump's like moving troops down to, or not troops, but ships down to the Venezuela. I saw a TikTok today that was saying that Venezuela, like my initial thought was that because Venezuela tried to nationalize their oil, and anytime you see a country do that, the US suddenly like shows up. But someone was saying that Venezuela is trying to push into like the neighboring country because Venezuela's oil is really heavy and hard to move, kind of like Canada's oil. Like their crude is really thick and it's hard to pull out of the ground. But there's a neighboring country that has light sweet oil, I think they were calling it, which honestly just kind of makes it sound like ice cream or something. And now I'm kind of hungry, but anyway, so there was a theory that Trump's moving their ships down there to protect that oil, not so much Venezuela's. But it brings me back to a while back. There was that guy, Lindsey Graham, and they were talking about going into Mexico. I even have tweets about it too. It was like, they were talking about going down there. Or no, first it was the Mexican president was talking about nationalizing their oil, just like Venezuela did. So then, like a week later, or I made a joke that, oh man, freedom's coming. If I could find the tweets, I'll try and share it somewhere. But I'm like, man, if they're going to nationalize the oil, then freedom is definitely coming any minute now. And then it wasn't even 2 days later, Lindsey Graham did a tweet talking about drug cartels and how the US needs to like get down there and fix that problem. So it does seem to be a pattern that like anytime a country wants to nationalize their exports that normally go to US companies, it's like, ah, man, it's freedom time. And I was kind of expecting more to come from that. I can't remember exactly what year it was though, because I think it might have been like Trump lost, so then they couldn't go through with it because the Republicans weren't really in power anymore. So that kind of fell off. But now you're seeing much bigger rise of it, especially with like Trump distributing troops all over the states right now, which is crazy. I don't think you've ever really seen that other than maybe in the workers' strikes. If anything, too, like people keep talking about distractions in the news. People say like, Trump does something to distract from the Epstein files, blah, 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 blah. But it honestly wouldn't surprise me if a lot of this stuff is a distraction from the fact that he's setting up National Guard troops across the states to because like you're seeing a movement kind of started with the quiet quitting anti-work thing where you're seeing a rise in worker consciousness, I guess, like class consciousness. So it wouldn't surprise me if he's setting up for kind of like, and especially with the way AI is going, taking over people's jobs, like I wouldn't be surprised if he's just trying to get ready for a rise in worker discontent, especially as an oligarch himself. Plus, like, look at the guy. If like he looks like he either has mob ties or really wishes he has mob ties. And based on what I've seen of his like family's dealings in New York, and I don't know much about New York, but I wouldn't be surprised if you have to have a degree of mob connection in a city like that in order to have any kind of success. But I mean, we all know like from the stories about him that he hasn't always been successful. Like he bankrupted his casinos and he mostly sells his name, which is when you think about it, it's like his dad's name, which is probably his dad's name, you know, how generational wealth works. He's just kind of selling his brand, which when you think about it is just his name. So it's not even really his. He's just selling what he inherited, which is pretty much typical Nepo baby behavior. So he seems to be like the figurehead that the oligarchs in the States like to prop up. Like they're investing in him basically because they can see that workers are kind of starting to realize how badly they've been getting screwed over. Especially, you're seeing it a lot in the school system lately. If you go to, I've been on Reddit a bunch and you see a ton of teachers, and I've seen it with my kids. Like my kids are 14 and 10. So I've seen it with my kids where the teachers are just overwhelmed with everything that the kids are doing because they're unruly and they don't want to pay attention. And I'm like, yeah, of course not. Like they never have. If you look at most like high school or school movies and TV shows from when we were kids, like it was all about how kids didn't really want to pay attention. They were bored. Like look at Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like that's pretty quintessential. It's got what's his face from the Visine ads up at the front of the class talking about tariffs, which is just coming full circle again. And none of these kids want to be there. Like a lot of kids have, especially if you have a neurodivergence like ADHD or you're on like the autism spectrum or something like I am, you just don't want to be there. Like it's so boring, like debilitatingly boring. And yeah, it sucks. And then I learned that the school system that we currently have was based on the Prussian model, which was designed around creating obedient factory workers and soldiers. And when you look at it, it's no surprise. Like you look at schools and they aren't exactly designed around learning. They don't look like the Pantheon or anything, or Parthenon, one of those. They don't exactly inspire education. They look like factories, and you have to get up super early, and you have to go there, you have to hop on the bus, go there, listen to your teachers, just hang out, have your breaks, and then go home at the end of the day, just like factory workers had to. And you got to be up early so that you can maximize the amount of light you use. Because if you look at factory workers, especially in the early industrial revolution, before electricity and lighting was widely distributed, they had to maximize the amount of time they were spending in factories like during the daytime, because it was just unsafe to do at night. Not that I mean, I'm sure some of them cared about safety, but from what I've seen, a lot of them really kind of didn't, especially when it came to their workers. Like the wealthy have always had kind of and not all wealthy, whatever, but a lot of wealthy people kind of tend to view all of us as livestock. Just we're workers just trying to complete the people in charge's objectives, you know? That's why it's called human resources, because we are just a resource to them, like no different than, say, like a wrench or something. Some of them I'm sure are good, and like, but I guess that attitude just kind of comes from seeing them as a tool and not as equals. And I think that's why they say you have to have a certain amount of sociopathy to really become wealthy. And I kind of believe that based on what I've been seeing. But like, honestly, I don't see it as being too different from what individuals do. Like growing up as a kid, I always kind of felt like an alien. And I think a lot of people who are on the ASD, autism spectrum disorder, like that spectrum, kind of talk about feeling the same way because I don't know, you kind of watch TV and movies, and because I didn't grow up with a lot of friends. Like I even had a book when I was in first grade. I had like a notebook, and my mom found it years later and gave it to me. And I remember reading it, and it was like, "Oh, today we did this in school." Blah 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 blah. I don't have any friends, and like I grew up not really socializing a lot, but now I realize it's because of I have a sound sensitivity. So being around too many people was just not great for me, which is part of the reason I didn't do well in school. Like I did well in the early stages, but I just kind of fell out of love with school because I kind of learn on my own. And I think self-directed learning is much more healthy for most people, especially anyone who has some kind of neurodivergency. So, yeah, it's just school is not a really good environment, but now we're seeing, especially with the rise of I think kids are so smart too. Like they see it. Parents don't need to explain that like the way we do school just doesn't work anymore, especially with the social contract breaking down. Like the old social contract was you go to school, you go to college, you get a good job, and then you're pretty set. But I mean, I've seen it. I'm sure everyone has seen it where you go to school, you go to college, you get in debt, and then you can't even find a job. So like, what's the point? So I really feel for the kids because they must clearly see it and all the stuff that their parents are going through to try and provide for them. And then they have to go and sit in school when they're already hyper-stimulated at home, and then they go to an environment that's inherently kind of boring. So as bad as it was for us, it's probably even worse for them. So I really feel for them, but then the teachers are kind of caught in the middle because I feel like we're on the cusp of like a major generational change, but we're not quite there yet. So then the people occupying those positions, like teachers, are trying to get control of kids that like don't want to be controlled. And I don't really see the point of the control. Like, what's the point of controlling these kids? I've been seeing videos of kids learning from AI, and I can honestly see that working better than what we have now, like way better as a system. I've heard stories out of China that they're making AI schools. I think there was one in the States too, probably in California, but yeah, like I think just self-directed AI learning is probably the way of the future because I mean, I myself learn way more from AI because it's infinitely patient and it talks to me in a way that I like. And if I don't like it, I can just tell it, hey, can you explain it to me in a different way? And it helps my kids with their school too, because a good example is my kiddo brought home some math that I haven't touched in, say, like, what am I now, 40? I've been in school like 30 years. So I just took a picture of it with my phone and said, hey, I'm trying to help my kiddo with this math. Can you help me help him? And it did. It like broke it down just from a picture and said, oh, this is the kind of math he's doing. Here's a way to instruct him. And yeah, it was awesome. I like sat with him, showed him how to do it. It was great. But I mean, I think we're at the point now where we have to start thinking about what kind of sci-fi franchise we want to all be a part of. And for me, it's 100% Star Trek. Like, I know Star Wars is way bigger than Star Trek in every way. But when you look at a galaxy that I want to be a part of, I mean, Star Trek's probably it. Because if you look at just the quality of life that people have, like, everything is provided for. The Federation doesn't really use money. Like, there's a good episode in Next Generation where they kind of unfreeze people from the 20th century and talk about how different life is. One of them is a businessman, and he says he needs to get back to Earth to deal with his all his finances and stuff. And then Picard has to tell him, like, oh, well, we don't really do that anymore. There's no more banks. Everything's just provided for because they have the technology. And if you look at the technology that they're using, it's replicators. And the way replicators work is they take kind of whatever object it is. Sorry, I have to plug my headphones in. They take whatever object you're using, like say a plate, and they break it down into the atomic level and then reprint it. And when you look at a lot of the technologies that we're using right now with lasers and virtual reality and drones and 3D printing, obviously, like if we could get it to the point where we can break stuff down to an atomic level, then you would just need a storage of all the base materials in order to recombine them into whatever you want. So that's like how replicators work. You also see it in video games, like No Man's Sky does the same thing. You shoot a laser at a rock, you break it down into carbon, and then you use each unit of carbon to build something new. So if I look at, say, I have a plushie here, it's like, oh, well, it's in this configuration, and all you would need to do is kind of 3D print it on a molecular level, but then you would just need the pattern, and then you could remanufacture everything you want, and then when you're done with it, you could put it back in and just recycle it. So I feel like we're on this weird cusp of technology and geopolitics, and yeah, just kind of, we're in a weird place where the future is almost here. Like what we think of as the future is almost here. And we're at a race to see, are we going to blow ourselves up? Are we going to like burn the world down? Or are we actually going to be smart enough to stop it? Like there's a famous, I don't know if it's famous, but there's a scene in the show, The Newsroom, where the guy who plays, what's his name? The HR dude from The Office. Toby? I think his name's Toby. Anyway, that actor's in this scene where he's the deputy director of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, I think it is. And in this scene, he's talking to a news anchor, and it's supposed to be just some bullshit nothing sketch. And it's like, so what are you here to talk about today? And he's like, oh, well, basically, the world's on fire and we're kind of screwed. And the news anchor is trying to tell him, okay, so how can we fix this? And I think the first line he says that really gets people's attention is, there's someone already born today who will die of catastrophic climate change. And I mean, if you look around in the world, I could see that for sure. And they keep trying to spin it to the positive, and he's just not having any of it. But there's one part where he's like, so what's a good metaphor for this? And he's like, okay, well, a good metaphor for the planet right now is like, you're in the garage, you have the car running, and you slip into going unconscious. And then the news anchor's like, okay, well, it's like the weekend. Can we try and brighten up people's day? Like, what if someone got there in time? And he's like, well, if someone got there in time, yeah, you'd have a chance of living. And then he's like, okay, well, what's the environmental equivalent of someone getting there in time? And he's like, shutting off the car 20 years ago. And it's like, it's hard not to see that, especially with all the wildfires. And I keep making people uncomfortable at work because they keep saying stuff like, I don't remember it being this hot around here this time of year. And then I'll say something like, oh man, it's like the climate is changing. If only scientists had warned us. Tends to make people uncomfortable. But I mean, it is what it is. But I love that sketch because it just kind of hits the nail on the head with everything that's going on. So I know this was supposed to be like an intro, but I think this kind of gives you an idea of what kind of show I'm trying to do here. I just have a lot of good rants about stuff, and they tend to like branch off into other things. And maybe if I can get it out here, then maybe my kids can get to bed on time. Because they always know I'm down for a good rant. What else is going on? Oh yeah, there was some news stories coming out that there's like a UFO. Like when they say UFO, they mean unidentified flying object. Like that's what it means. So UFOs exist because it just means any flying object that we can't identify. So having said that, there's an object that's like headed towards Earth and should be arriving in like November, December timeframe. And there's some theories that based on the trajectory, I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but it is interesting to me because it opens up some like questions. So there is an object that's like headed towards our solar system and should be arriving in that kind of time frame. And some people are saying that like the trajectory is the same kind of trajectory you would use if you were like, say, an advanced humanoid species trying to do a flyby of Earth. And something to do with the speed of it means it could be not natural, I'll say. So then, obviously, that brings up some, like, X-Files type shit, where is there an alien spacecraft coming? And if there is, what does it mean? And to me, it means, like, I really don't see all the disaster movie type shit. Like, why would aliens waste all their time coming here to blow us up? Like, they could have done that a long time ago. Like, why do it now? Some people would argue that they wait for us to develop to a certain point that we have enough resources that they can exploit, kind of how you feed a cat. Like, we could probably eat. There's certain things we can't eat, so we feed it to, like, we can't eat grass really, but we can feed grass to a cow and then eat the cow. So then their whole idea is that humans are just here. We're going to convert unusable material into usable material, and when we reach a certain point, then the aliens will come by and harvest us. But to me, it still seems like a huge waste of time, because, like, you got to figure their crafts are, like, huge, but what do I know? But I feel like if aliens were going to come visit, again, going back to the Star Trek thing, I think it would be a more likely scenario that it would be like a first contact from Star Trek kind of situation. Like, if they're going to waste all the resources, it's going to be for something long term. And to me, like, if you look at Star Trek, they make first contact when a species gets to warp technology, and then they'll reach out, they'll make contact, and then kind of welcome people into the galaxy kind of thing. And maybe I'm just being too hopeful here, but that's kind of what I'm hoping for, is that if it were, and again, I don't think it is, but if it were, I would hope they would be coming to say hi, because we're inventing, like, all this AI technology. I think that's what would be the threshold, or it could be a threshold for aliens to be like, hey, what's up? We see that you guys are at the point where we could say hi. But I mean, of course, the counterpoint is, like, are we too crazy to actually do that? I don't know. I like to think humans aren't that self-defeating to the point where we would just try and fight anything that came to say hi. But I mean, the news around the world does not fill me with joy or hope over that, to be honest. Like, the whole situation in Israel. I do want to get into that, because I don't want to be scared to talk about it, because, I mean, everybody's talking about it right now. But I would say for a long time, people have said you can't talk about that because it's, like, anti-Semitic. But I don't have any problem with Jewish people at all. But I mean, I think you can criticize the state and not have a problem with the people, you know? Like, if Japan made a stupid decision, like the Japanese government made a stupid decision, and I was like, man, the Japanese government's stupid, that doesn't mean I hate Japanese people. So I think it's no different than, like, with Israel. Like, I think the government is making some really bad decisions, but I mean, when you, like, look at the map that they generated for when they tried to build the Israeli state, like, you want to have a Palestinian state that's geographically separated. I know you kind of have that with the U.S. because, like, Alaska's separated from the U.S., but if you look at, like, there's, like, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and they're completely separated, and you have to drive through Israel, basically travel through Israel to get there. I mean, it was never going to happen. And I'm no historian, really. Like, I went to university for history, and I watched a ton of history documentaries, mostly because they put me to sleep. I have sleep issues, but documentaries tend to help. But anyway, like, I think that whole situation is honestly really sad. And it makes me think of, like, in the 80s and 90s, I feel like we were so close. Like, at the end of the day, we're all going to have to come together as a planet eventually. And I feel like we're so close, but we still are carrying all this old baggage that doesn't let us really come together as a planet. Like, I did a rant. It was one of the rants that actually kind of created this, about how Trump is an accidental globalist. Like, he always talks about making America great again. But if you look at it, America was only great, well, not only great, but one of the primary reasons it was great on the world stage is because it was geographically separated from everything that happened in World War II. Like, the US, Canada were able to gather resources, send them across the sea because we weren't being challenged by like Germany. And then a lot of our major competition industrially was destroyed because of the war. So post World War II, of course, America is going to have supremacy because most of their competition has been destroyed. So then over the next, it's been 90 years or so, almost. Like all that competition has rebuilt itself. And America created its own primary competition when it sold its manufacturing to China, which of course it would do. Like that's what any rich nation does. Like if you look at Rome, they still farmed in Italy, but because of just the sheer population they had to support, they imported a lot of their grain and stuff from Egypt and other places all over the empire. And then every country kind of came together to support the empire, and that's what happened. Is after World War II, we had kind of the U.S. empire, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, because they were the main superpower, and they were riding that wave for many decades, understandably so, because, I mean, who wouldn't? But then, like, it was the same with the Roman Empire. Like, you're not just importing when you do that, you're kind of also empowering those states by giving them money. So then, which is a resource, obviously. And then America did the same thing with China. Like World War II, the U.S. was a major manufacturing location, like country, because of all the stuff for the war. They could have carried that on, but they didn't. They took that wealth and they did what most humans do. And it's not, like when you think about it, it's not even the country. Like everybody talks about how this country did this and this organization did that, but really everything's just based on individual contributions, and the individuals are kind of greedy. So it's like say I'm a middle manager at some company post World War II, and now we're transitioning from making tanks to making cars. Well, I'm going to try and make sure I get my, what do they call it? I'm not going to use the South Park version, but I'm going to make sure that my cut is as big as I can get it. So then maybe I'm going to, instead of having these parts, maybe say I'm in charge of getting carburetors made. It's like, well, I'm going to take my carburetors, and instead of having them made in Detroit, I'm going to have them made in China. So now I've just sold the manufacturing of my carburetors to China just so that I can get a bit more. And people did that on an individual basis for generations. And they piecemeal sold everything off. So then, and like China they had a population crisis. Like that's why they had the one-child policy. So of course they're going to have low labor costs. So then you're going to sell it to them. But then those jobs are going to empower China. So that can't last forever. And now China's doing the same thing. A lot of them they've been offloading their labor to other countries that are having similar problems. But I feel like you can only have so many iterations of that before we just run out of people. And especially, like, there's a lot of talk about the population crisis that's going on the planet, because a lot of countries aren't replacing their populations. Like, you need to have 2.5 kids or something like that. Like, I don't know where they're getting half the kid from, but obviously I do, just being stupid. But yeah, so like if global populations are leveling off, I think a lot of the economic problems that we've been seeing globally, like we're trying to blame it all on individuals. But if you look at it from a more holistic, like planet-wide perspective, we're just seeing the leveling off of the population. Like if you look at graphs of the human population, it was pretty stable for basically the entirety of human history. And then the Industrial Revolution came about, and now all of a sudden we're up in the billions. And I've seen projections that say we'll level off at like 9 or 10 billion. Like I remember growing up, one of the news articles that you see on a semi-regular basis is like, hey, the global population is now 8 or 9 billion. So then I never even thought about it when I was little, but it's like, well, where's this going to end? Like, we have to level off somehow. And I think we're seeing that now. I think there's UN projections that say once country reaches a certain level of GDP per capita, they just stop having babies. And I think I saw a study about, I think populations of animals do the same thing. Like when there's just too many of a certain kind of animal, they tend to control themselves by just not breeding anymore. And I think that's what we're seeing is there's just too many people on the planet. Like the old joke I heard a lot of people say is like traffic is too thick, we need a new plague. But then COVID happened and we had a plague and everybody fought it. So then it's like, well, I mean, understandably, I'm not saying we shouldn't. Like, obviously, every individual wants to protect themselves and their families. That's completely understandable. So the idea that we're reducing our global population by just deciding not to have kids is honestly the most humane way to reduce global populations. But our economy of, well, the globe mostly is tied around growth because, I mean, that's what we've grown to expect for generations. It's just that everything is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I think we're just reaching the point where everything is too big, you know? So I still think that like a lot of the economic problems we're seeing with inflation and all that actually has to do with when the pot's not growing anymore, like when the pot's not getting any bigger, that means each person has to pay more. Like that's what's going to happen. So everything's going to kind of level off, but I don't think people will put up with like what's going on for too long because the rich just keep getting richer and we all know that. Because like money buys new money, but I mean, I can't see how that system can last forever. And to me, inevitably, with like AI and robotics and stuff, inevitably we're gonna have to move to like a global UBI, like a universal basic income kind of thing. So if you're gonna have a UBI, and I brought it up in the last little bit, it was about the UN. So we have the United Nations, which I think, like I was saying before, like the globe seemed pretty close to being globalized after World War II. The League of Nations was after World War I, but that failed. And then the UN came out after. And I think in order for the globe to come together and have a UBI, first, it has to be from the UN. The UN has to push for it. And I think we need to get rid of the dollar and the dong and all the other, I always pick them because it's the funniest, but all the other currency types and just have a global currency. Like maybe we don't get rid of all the global currencies, like maybe the regional currencies are their own thing. But the UN would have to come out with its own currency, like credits or something. I think even Star Wars has like Republic credits, you know, that kind of thing. But then each region could have their own. I don't know. Someone smarter than me could figure that part out. But I think the biggest problem with us coming together right now under the format that the UN has is the veto power. Like they were so close to having something that would actually work, and then they gave veto power to certain countries, and that just fucked everything. Like they were so close. If the UN could have, if you could have a UN that actually had teeth, like I'm always just like on the fence about that. Like as far as militaries, like would you want a UN police force? I don't think you'd want a police force per se, but like a humanitarian force or something. But anyway, like you'd have to get rid of veto in order to fix the UN. You have to get rid of veto, like just flat out. That can't be a thing. You can't have the globe come together if one country can just say, no, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever I want. Like that's where they fucked it up. So either they need to vote in the UN to get rid of the veto, which obviously will be vetoed. So then the only other alternative is to create a new UN, which kind of sucks because they already have all the infrastructure set up through the UN. So it kind of blows that they would have to do that. But I mean, maybe you could see that coming up through the BRICS. I always screw this up, but it's Brazil, Russia, India, China, BR, and then South Africa, BR. I think that's right. But anyway, so BRICS seems to be coming up as an alternative to like the G7 and that kind of stuff. So I could see there being maybe an alternative to the UN one day. But if it has veto power, like if there's any countries in any replacement that has veto power, then it doesn't make any sense. Like we need to start viewing things from a global perspective. And anyway, my point from a while back was like that Trump is an accidental globalist because like he talks about making America great, but like I already went over how America was great because of like the aftermath of World War II. And a lot of his changes, like he was talking about how Canada is only separated from the US because of that big, beautiful, well, not beautiful, from that invisible line that people drew like years ago. And like as much as Canadians hate to agree with it, it is true. Like the borders are only there because people agreed to it a long time ago. And he is right that the two countries would work together much more efficiently if those borders were erased. But I mean, he might be right about that, but then that's also true of all the countries. But I don't think he'll ever. It's hard to say because there's always bleed over culturally from like countries, especially if they neighbor each other. Like I know a lot of Canadians really hate the idea of being the 51st state, but I have always had a controversial opinion on that, in that it would be a good thing. And like we could maintain some kind of cultural sovereignty. Because I mean, even if you look at Canada right now, we're not even 100% sovereign. Like I know we have the Dominion Act and all that stuff and Confederation, and we are technically our own country, but we still have a lot of cultural ties to England. And like technically the leader of our armed forces isn't the prime minister, it's the governor general who reports to the king. And like a lot of our stuff, it is ceremonial, but we're still attached to the hip to Britain, which is an ocean away. And if you look at even just our military, like we always have this weird mix of like US and we're like the bastard child between the US and the Brits. It's always been the case, but geographically we're attached to the hip to the US. So if the US really wants us, I think we all know there's a line in the sand where if troops start crossing the border, then we're kind of done for. Like Canada's neglected its military for, well, a long, long time, basically since it was made. But I mean, like, and it's not one party that's done it. I have some history books about Canada after like the American Revolution and what was the other one? The Civil War. So like picture your Canada, which technically isn't a country yet. You're still England, basically. America just had a giant revolution to get rid of England. But you're Canada and you're attached at the hip to the US. And they just had a giant war. They still have like huge standing armies. So the only way you're really going to be able to fight back is if you brought over troops from England, which is logistically like impossible. So like it's just impossible to win a war like that. You can't win a war like where you're taking like the country you're attacking is across the ocean. Like the US has learned this lesson. Well, I'd like to think they learned that lesson, but they probably haven't. Is like the only reason they won World War II is because there was countries that were like in Europe, obviously, that were close to Germany, and the US, with the aid of those countries, came in and, helped in the war. But like you can't really, one country can't just have a war across the ocean like that. So anyway, anytime like Canada would think about standing up a major force, the US would get understandably anxious because they're like, well, we just fought a war to get rid of England. We can't have you guys with a giant military up there, so you guys basically can't have a big military. And Canada was scared of having a big military back then because it would draw the attention of the US. And especially after the Civil War, like, in as much as the Civil War would have weakened them because of the troops that were killed and all the destruction and all that, they still had a giant standing militaries and militias all over the place. So if Canada started building their own military, the US would see it as a threat. So Canada's always maintained a small military that's used to train the militia in the event of a big war, like World War II or the Boer War and stuff. So if you look at the precursors for Canadian armored units, they were the cavalry units. And the precursor to that is the Northwest Mounted Police, because they couldn't have like cavalry units because they're part of the military, but they still needed a policing force to police the West. So they created the Northwest Mounted Police. And then when the Boer War happened, those Northwest Mounted Police got called up into the first like cavalry regiments, which became the first armored units, like that kind of stuff. So that's a perfect like example of how it's a cultural thing that Canada doesn't prioritize its military. And growing up when I was a kid, the military was always a joke. It was sad, like not the people. The soldiers themselves aren't jokes. Like they're hardworking, patriotic people that just want to, serve their country. But the ongoing jokes were always like, do we even have a military? Like, do we have an army? And like West Edmonton Mall has 4 more subs than the Navy has. Like that was an ongoing joke all the time because Canada never really maintained a strong military force. We kind of got into the peacekeeping role, which I kind of agree was... I never was a peacekeeper. And a lot of the stories I've heard from the peacekeeping in like Rwanda is that it wasn't great. And there's probably a reason we don't do it anymore. But anyway, so we're not big on maintaining a military force at all. So if the U.S. wanted to cross the border, put boots on the ground in Canada, that would be the line in the sand because, you don't have to look too far in the news to see that Canada's military has a pretty big recruiting crisis right now. And we maintain a small force to begin with. It's 100,000. That's including reservists. So, and we can't even maintain that. So, let's be real. There's a line in the sand where if the U.S. really had the appetite to take us over militarily, it would be no contest. Now, obviously that would damage their reputation on the world stage, which I think is the main thing stopping them from doing that. But, look at the guy who's down there right now. He's deploying National Guard troops in his own countries. So, what the... eventually the brainworms will get to him, and he might actually have an appetite to make us the 51st state. He's always talked about he would welcome us if we decided to do it, but... And then if you look at certain oil-rich provinces... There's a certain timeline I did a Twitter research post about. It was I can't even remember the exact dates, but it was Trump won, and then the premier of Alberta went down to Mar-a-Lago to talk to him. And then the separatist movement started. So basically what I'm trying to say is I'm pretty sure that Danielle Smith is working with Trump to try and sell Alberta to the U.S., or at least their oil anyway. It all depends on the political environment. They keep pushing this idea that there's a big separatist movement in Alberta, but I haven't seen that really borne out in a lot of the stats. As much as you can believe stats, I'm not gonna lie, there's people in Alberta that probably want to separate, but I really don't think they're as big of a voting bloc as the news seems to indicate. So, the only logical conclusion to me is that they're just trying to sell their oil to the States, because that's all Alberta's really about these days. It's there's some farming, but Alberta's oil country, for sure. But yeah, so, I don't even know what that would look like. And the other thing is, they keep talking about the ice caps melting and opening up resource harvesting in the north, and I think that will be the big decider, especially if Russia starts staking claim, and China. Russia and China is the biggest country, second biggest, such a big country, China. Anyway, sorry. So if countries start staking claim to the Arctic, that's where Canada has to get involved. But if the U.S. wants to get involved in the Arctic, which they have a right to through Alaska, the question is, how are they going to get Canada involved? We don't really have a military to begin with. Are they going to help us build our military, or are they just going to take us over and make us a state? I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I'm done for now, though. My throat's starting to get sore, and I was supposed to eat an hour ago, but if you listen to this whole thing, thank you very much for hanging out for my first episode. I'm Microplastic Messiah, and this is my weird idea for a rant fest so that my kids can go to bed on time. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good one. Bye.